Another Crab's Treasure has proven to be a welcome entry to the Souls-like genre. It's colorful and vibrant, with a beautiful color palette and a cute aesthetic. But under the hood, it's a serious game, with adult themes and good morals, and some pretty damn good boss fights to boot. It's an impressive game, truly one of my favorites in 2024 so far, and even more impressive when you factor in the fact that it's a small 12-person approximately team known as Aggro Crab, pretty fitting. One of the many mechanics in the game is called Adaptations. These are basically super strong ultimate abilities that cost umami. That's this game's version of mana or magic. And these adaptations cost a very large amount of umami. At least at the beginning of the game, you don't have very much. So you really have to pick and choose strategically when and how you want to use your adaptations. Ultimately, there are only 8 total adaptations in the game, and you really only find about 5 of them if you just stick to the main story and beeline it through and don't explore or go off the beaten path or fight any of the optional bosses. So given that these adaptations are so missable, and that there are 8 of them, I figured it'd be helpful to give my opinion and do a good old-fashioned tier list. Help you guys out, help you pick the ones that you want to take into those boss fights, especially later in the game when you have some of them upgraded, maybe fully maxed out, and you have a lot to choose from. Lots of spoilers here with how you get some of these adaptations, so just fair warning for you now. Let's get into it. Starting off first is Royal Wave. This one is found simply by defeating the Duchess as one of your first handful of boss fights. It's a pretty fun fight, and the reward is very much worth it. Quote, subjugate enemies in front of you with a massive swipe of the Dungeness Crab's Claw, causing them briefly to take increased damage from all sources. This is effectively poison if you're a Crab Champions fan. Hey, another crab game for you. Or basically Slag from Borderlands 2. It's a debuff, and I've scoured the internet. I can't figure out the exact percentage, but even if it's only about 10 to 15, 20% buff, it's still very nice. That being said, it does cost a lot of umami, even when upgraded. At level 2, the size and damage of the swipe is increased, and at level 3, the cost is lowered by 1 umami charge. But I still think it's very high, and there are others that can deal more damage for the same or lesser umami cost. So for that reason, I think it's great, but it's not quite S tier. We'll put it in A. Next, we will move on to Urchin Toss. This is the first optional one that you can find chronologically, and basically, you get this by just running into that urchin that's on the lower crust of New Carcinia over and over and over and over and over again. It's pretty funny, but eventually it will give you this adaptation. And it reads that you throw an urchin that sticks to enemies before exploding, and that's pretty much it. It's a bomb. At level 2, it will actually magnetize or black hole, it'll pull enemies towards the explosion, and at level 3, the size and power is increased. I did not get this one until fully completing the game and going back after, and I never actually used it against bosses. But if we look at the comparable damage that I'm dealing with my hammer with my regular attacks, and then if I look at the damage that this thing does, I'm fairly confident that this does truly massive damage, and I'm a little bit annoyed that I didn't get to use it against any boss enemies. So I'm not exactly sure on how strong this one is, but I'm gonna move it up to A tier. Let me know if you disagree in the comments. Next is yet another optional one that I truly missed until the end of the game. Like, I beat the game, and then you can come back and you can just kind of re-explore before going into the final fight again, right? And I was like, I've seen this red logo in screenshots on the Reddit, Twitter, and whatnot. Like, what is that? It is the Bobbit Trap. This is found by venturing very far west in the sands between, which was a lot easier now that our big bad boy freaking Pagras is gone. Definitely wouldn't recommend trying to get this until you've already defeated Pagras, but once you do, it's pretty easy. Venture way west, you'll eventually find it. And this places a spectral bobbit worm, which are those worms that come out of the sand and jump scare you. You get to use one of those basically. You place it, or even just throw it directly at an enemy, and it worms them. At level 2, the damage over time will be applied to the trapped enemy, so it traps the enemy, and then it'll do additional damage over time while the enemy is trapped for a few seconds. And then at level 3, the trapped enemies for longer, and makes them take increased damage from all sources, so they can be trapped kind of in midair like a siren from the Borderlands series. I know I keep on talking about Borderlands, but it's very relevant here, so it's kind of like the phase grasp there. Ultimately, similar boat to the Urchin Toss, where I unfortunately did not get to use it against any bosses. The damage seems decent, but not quite nearly as high as the Urchin Toss. So for that reason, I don't know how high I can put it. I just don't think it's that crazy. It looks cool, and maybe if you were doing an umami build, funneling all your points into MSG, it could be pretty strong, but for now, I'm going B tier. Let's argue in the comments if that's dumb. Moving on to the second one that you get if you're just following the main story is the Mantis Punch. This is naturally achieved by defeating the mantis shrimp Topata himself. One of my favorite fights. This one's great. What it does is you smack a dude with the Mantis Punch. And then at level 2, you will actually be protected during the wind-up phase. It is quite a hefty wind-up, maybe a full second or two. And then at level 3, you will actually move super fast with imperceptible speed before reappearing and smacking your target. So you can kind of phase jump forward, do a little wraith move if you're into Apex. It's extremely high damage and knockback damage. You know, that yellow bar where you can eventually hit a crit move if you've unlocked that skill. Very good. I mean, I single-handedly beat Pagaris because I was able to strategically and luckily land a nice Mantis Punch hit that sent him into that vulnerable stage. I hit a nice crit attack on him, and then it was just a few more shots to finish him off. It was very satisfying. This is a strong freaking attack. But even when you're protected with that level 2 upgrade from being interrupted, you're not protected from taking damage. And pretty much every time I've used this, I end up taking some sort of damage. So that holds it back from being S in my opinion. This is another A. I think it's better than the Urchin, but I don't quite know if it's as good as the Royal Wave. I'm going to put it here as second for the time being. Another optional one, the Tactical Tentacle. I said that weird, but we're going to leave that in. Summon a tentacle of pure umami that attacks along with you and swings your blade. This is obtained by defeating the optional boss, the Consortium, which is found in an alternate route that links the Grove to Flotsam Vale. I didn't find this one initially. I actually had to look it up, but it's worth it. At level 2, the size and summon duration is increased, so it has a little bit more range and will stay with you for longer. And then at level 3, you also get a damage buff, and the attacks have some life steal, some healing, so the attacks from the tentacle will heal you. What this means is that by the time you're level 3, you really will always be doing more damage than you take. So what you can do is, even during your hard boss fights, like what I did, if you've seen some of my videos just taking out the later game bosses, is I just spam this at level 3, run in, and just mash the attack button on some of these harder bosses, and it doesn't matter because my Tactical Tentacle is smacking for like 10 seconds straight. I mean, you're getting double damage effectively for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 swings in a row, and you're healing the whole time. So even if you take a couple of big boss level attacks, you're fine. I think it's insane. And look, some of you might see it at level 1 and be like, eh. But I promise you, this is by far, in my opinion, the best adaptation in the game, and our only S tier, the Tactical Tentacle. There it is. Moving on to more of the straight and narrow, the plot-driven ones, we've got the Bubble Pistol. You get this from defeating the Ceviche sisters on your way to that second map piece in Flotsam Vale, almost to the mailbox, right? You mimic the pistol shrimp's might projectile. So you fire a damaging bubble of umami. At level 2, the bubble is larger and can actually capsize the enemies. That's where they're in that down state and can be attacked with like a crit attack if you have that skill unlocked, right? And then at level 3, it's actually rapid fire. You'll use more umami, but then boom, 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 you can hit them multiple in a row. Unfortunately, even at level 3, the bonus that you're getting here, the damage output, it's just not that high. Like, I guess this is nice to pop in between main attacks, but for me personally, it's peanuts compared to what I could get with the Tentacle, or even the buff from the Wave or the Mantis Punch damage. It's just not that great in my opinion. I think it's cool, I think it's fun, but strategically, this is a C tier in my opinion. 2 left, let's get into it. Another one that you'll find, the Electrocute. You call upon the powerful eel to shock nearby enemies and even power certain equipment. This is obtained by defeating Voltaire, and that's a goofy fight, but it's a fun one, it's unique, and it's ultimately the only real adaptation that applies a legitimate stun to enemies. At level 2, the duration is increased, so you'll stun more enemies or more damage, and level 3, the damage per stun, per attack with it increases, and the stun duration increases. Realistically, this is less, again, it's less about damage output, it's more about stunning for a tactical advantage and exploring the world. There are areas in the map that you will find the little crab guys made out of like car batteries almost. You have to electrocute those to open up those doors and move forward. You can't do it unless you have this. So part of the literal exploration in the map is gate kept behind this one, and for that reason it's pretty important. And again, tactically it's not too bad. Throw this one in B tier. I think it's behind the Bobbit Trap. And finally, last but not least, the Snail Sanctum. This is obtained when you beat Peatrock, Pee-Pee-Poo-Poo Man. This boss was a little bit unexpected, the false moon, as it were, and quite simply, when you don't have a shell, this adaptation will give you a shell made out of pure umami. It's pretty strong. At level 2, it'll give it a shell spell as well, which adds to the viability of the shell. And at level 3, it'll greatly improve the stats, which basically ups the durability and ups the defense stat that you get from it, while still keeping it as medium. It's pretty solid, it's pretty adequate. Unfortunately, I almost never found myself in a position where I was naked without a shell and truly couldn't find a usable one nearby, especially once I got the skill in the skill tree where, once per shell, it would just respawn itself after it broke. So you basically get double the usage out of every single shell, and all the boss fights had ample shells lying around. Those are really the only situations where I'd be screwed in a pinch and needing an additional shell. So it's cool. I used it a little bit after, but I didn't actually use it a single time in a main boss fight in the game. It's not bad, but it's not amazing. It serves a purpose. It's cool. I see why it's in there, but I'm gonna have to put it C tier just due to the lack of usability, or not the lack of usability, but my interest is very low in this one. There we have it. Only one S tier, couple A, couple B, couple C. This is of course only my opinion, but it really did get to a point where, trying to think of the boss fights here. Yeah, I mean, it really just got to a point where I got my tactical tentacle to level 3. I would keep as my second one either the wave to get some bonus damage. I mean, Christ, if you had enough umami, you could wave them, switch to the tentacle, pop the tentacle, and then you're smacking them twice, once with your own attack, once with the tentacle, and it's buffed. I mean, that combination is insane amount of damage. Once I got to even the Roland fight, from that point forward, we got Kamsha, Ingerton, Playa Dubia, and of course our boy Firth. I just rolled through all of them in literally first try or dying once at that point, including Kamsha, who's got that hard phase too, Ingerton, who can be hard, but I mean, with this combination, you could easily chunk their health to the point where they're capsized, get the crazy crit attack, and then maybe this tactical tentacle runs out, you pop it again to finish them off, and bada boom, bada bam. It's a 3-minute fight, even with pausing and making sure I have everything in my loadout situated. I just never was like, let me use the bubble pistol. Let me electrocute him. It didn't matter. I just run in and smack him with the tentacle. So not everyone's gonna have the build that supports that. But then again, I mean, this definitely scales off umami, and I didn't even stack my MSG very high. I was mostly an attack stack. This is pretty much, I mean, this is after the final boss, so even with a adequate MSG, which is how your umami abilities scale, which includes your adaptations, it still didn't matter. We pop the tentacle, and we just go to town on these bosses, and it's easy. But let me know. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let's argue in the comments. Let's have a nice, aggressive, petty argument. We love these tier lists, baby. It's 2024. They're still going strong. We got a lot more coming. Appreciate you watching. If you like the video, it helps me out. YouTube algorithm, something or other, I don't know. Subscribe to the channel for more of this, and hopefully I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.